Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember this information, it is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And Cam, I believe we have a guest. Yes, that's her in the distance, riding in on a Slizzard. It is, of course, Daisy Edwards from the W-Rated podcast. Hello, Daisy.
Hi, and my Slizzard says hello too.
I really hope that doesn't mean anything else, and I'm sorry for the American listeners or someone else who's offended by the word Slizzard.
Luckily I'm not, so that's good.
I am just aghast that you would say that, Scott.
But Daisy, welcome aboard. Now, I suppose I should probably spell out how this guest spot came to be a little bit. Now, I think we were talking over a year ago at this point. I think you actually moved somewhere that I'm familiar with
Clapham,
there.
So I don't know if that's
Then we got on talking about spy movies, and I said, hey, we'd love to have you on at some point. And you said, Spy Kids 2.
Just with no other.
No, that was it.
No,
That's the one you wanted.
Explanation, nothing. I just said those words.
Yeah, that was your only reply to me. I don't think you really want to talk to me that much.
And then that was it. I
a
haven't
lot.
spoken to you since.
Yeah. That's about the same as my usual
like
friendships, to be fair. Yeah.
You actually blocked him. It made it very difficult for us to track you down for this guest spot.
Yeah, for sure.
And so finally we got around to Spy Kids 2, and so we had to fulfill this. We had to have you on because you were so passionate to just call that film out above Casino Royale, above like The Man Who Came In From the Cold. It's Spy Kids 2.
The one and only.
Well, but apart from that, we're glad you're here. Clearly, you have expertise on it that we need. But tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? And tell us about your podcast as well.
Sure. So, as you know, my name's Daisy. Have a podcast called W-Rated where me and my co-host she does the editing. She even does the booking now. So I'm not sure I'm of any use. Claire, we actually watch the bottom 100 rated films on IMDb. So clearly we're gluttons for punishment. But it's been a ride so far. That's been a lot of fun. I work in PR during the day, but I do some producing of short films outside of that. And yes, a prolific Twitter user, although terrible at answering DMs, clearly.
Well, I have a question about your podcast, tackling the bottom on IMDb. There's a lot of great stuff there. We actually did an episode recently for our Patreon on Jaws the Revenge, which I think is still in the bottom 100. It may have
as far as
out.
I'm aware, yeah, it is, and we've got a lot of interest for it, so we're keeping that for one of the special episodes, I think.
That's like a home run booking one, yeah. I'm curious what some of the movies you've tackled on your podcast, what were some of the most fun episodes you did?
I think, and this sounds completely counterproductive, but one of the most fun was my most hated, just because it was just so cathartic to talk about, was one of the parody films, Vampires Suck. It's made by the same guys that did Date Movie and things like that, which we also did, which is absolutely terrible, which is basically a parody on Twilight, and I just didn't find maybe I had one laugh, so it was just devoid of any kind of humour for me. But I guess Alex thinks it is hilarious, so it was just such an interesting and infuriating conversation to have, and it just goes to show the power and art of cinema, I guess. Not that you can call that cinema in my opinion, but just how two people who watch the same film can have the complete opposite experience. So that was a fun one to cover.
I remember when those guys, was it Friedberg and Seltzer, I think?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we're making all of those movies. I think they did Date Movie. I only saw one.
Date Movie is one that we did right at the beginning. We really set ourselves up with that one. And it should be called Dated Movie because, my God, all of the jokes are solidly stuck in the 2000s and have no sense of humour attached to them anymore. We were pretty offended by it, to be honest.
All of their movies were just here's a reference. Here's a reference.
Yeah.
There was no actual joke. It was just
whatever happened in that year.
It's what happens if a cow falls on Iron Man? And you're okay, there you have it.
Some people want to know, and they answered that question for them. So, Who am I to judge? I do. I judged a lot, actually.
Just goes to show there is some cinema for everyone, basically.
Yeah, if you can call it that.
Well, I wonder. I haven't checked the bottom 100, but I do wonder if one of our dinosaurs is missing. Is hidden down there somewhere.
No way.
It's in the middle somewhere?
Not that I don't recognise the name. The thing is with the bottom 100, which is interesting because a lot of people sort of are quite surprised by some of them on there. Either some of the worst films that they've seen on there, or some of the ones on there, they're like, surely that's not that bad. The way that they aggregate the score is based on, it has to have over 10,000 votes, so it has to be like a film of a certain popularity. And
Right.
anyone who is regularly rating on IMDb, their vote is like upweighted because, you know, they've got a bit more of clout, I guess, in terms of, you know, just contributing to the site. So it's an interesting algorithm that they've pulled together, old IMDb. But, you know, for the sake of having a laugh, it works.
Yeah, I don't think anything we've tackled on our show is on the bottom 100. I mean, Jaws the Revenge being the only one with the Patreon stuff that I can think of.
I mean, we have had some bad spy films, but I think Daisy nailed it there. Basically, it hasn't had enough fans. I don't think enough people have been on IMDb to talk about Remo Williams or one of our dinosaurs is missing. And nor should they.
And even like Taken 2 would be nowhere near the bottom 100.
No, exactly. I think the highest rating that's on the bottom 100 is no higher than 3 stars out of 10. And even with like stuff that's like big blockbusters, you know, it's pretty bad. You're always going to have the people that are like, I'm here for a good time. This is popcorn, like blockbuster. Like it'll always be a lot more average than you expect. It really has to be bottom of the barrel for it to be popular enough, but be scored low enough. It's an interesting mix.
Do you find that the films that get like review bombed, like Eternals had a rough ride, do they end up in there sometimes?
Yeah, we've actually got one that Claire's really keen to watch because of that. It's Black Christmas, the remake that came out in 2019. And
Yeah.
as far as I'm aware, she said it got review bombed because it was an all-female remake or something like, or it was very pro-feminism or something like that. Basically, it pissed off a lot of chauvinists, I guess. I don't really know much about it, but she's really intrigued to see if that really is the case, and I guess it gives us a good opportunity to talk about the kind of, you know, review websites like IMDb and whether they're, or, you know, you have the whole argument about Rotten Tomatoes and whether you should take that with a pinch of salt and things like that. So
I have seen that Black Christmas remake, and yeah, it is a very like feminist film, but it tackles its themes with the strength of a sledgehammer to the head. Like, so I can see why.
I'm gonna quote you. I'm gonna quote you when we get to that episode.
I can see why a demographic of voters on IMDb would be particularly angry about it. It would not make my bottom 100 by any stretch of the imagination, but I can see why that subsect would be raging after watching it.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm gonna nick that voice clip, I think, and input that into the episode. So a little credit goes to you there.
Awesome.
Cam, for that one.
That'll be my legacy.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've assembled 2 spy dudes and a spy dudette, unless you want to just use dude as the plural for all of us. We're all spy dudes here. And Cam, I've already said the film, but I'll ask you the question anyway. What the hell are we talking about this week?
Yeah, we're talking about Spy Kids 2: Island of Lost Dreams from the year 2002.
Daisy, take it away.
So we open with. I would love to tell you that I could do that. I think the only film I could probably do that with is Shrek, and do a dialogue line by line, scene by scene breakdown. But yeah.
As long as you gave us the Smash Mouth song at the end.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
No,
all
I
need,
think we
really.
should bring in the song from this film. You said you don't like it, but I don't know. It's a bit of a banger to me.
Okay. Well, I think before we get into that, I distinctly remember this film coming out. I liked the first one. I think I saw this one in cinemas too. And our family, 4 brothers, some younger, some older, and we liked these films. So we had them on VHS or DVD. I can't remember what format, but we definitely watched these ones over and over again. So a lot of these scenes were just in my memory. I just saw it, and I remember Steve Buscemi. Mm-hmm. I remember the dinosaurs, although I thought they were a lot cooler back then than they look now. But I'm interested about you two. So Daisy, what's your memory of the film?
Yeah, I absolutely went to see this in the cinema. I'm not sure if I saw the first one. I definitely saw the second 2. Yeah, with my family, and I just remember absolutely something just clicked with me. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so much fun. I remember bringing in the first one to school. You know, when you have those days where they're like, the teachers are so done and they're like, just bring in a DVD. and we'll watch a DVD, wherever you want. And someone brought in Spy Kids and everyone went mental for it. I can't remember such love from my peers for the second one, but I know that I wore out that DVD for sure. I was just like, this, 3 kind of dropped off in terms of quality for me, for however old I was at the time. But number 1 and 2 were definitely on rotation for a long time. I'm not even sure. I've got 3 little brothers. There's quite a bit of an age gap. I don't think. Maybe they did watch it with me, but no, this for sure is like pure nostalgia for me rewatching these back, and I think I'll be a lifelong fan because of that.
So it was quite personal to you, really. Like, if you weren't sharing it with your siblings who they're a bit younger than you, that was kind of a film you picked up on and held tight. It's something you liked. That's
I think that, no, I hadn't thought about it that way. I don't know what ended up happening to my DVDs, but I've rebought them all 3 on Blu-ray recently, so, I've got that for life now.
We're funding more Spy Kids films, I think. By doing these reviews, we're creating more.
I would love them to do, for all the reboots and sequels that we've got going on, I would love for them to come back as adults and it be their kids. I would love that so much.
Well, they do appear as adults in the 4th one.
They do, but the less we talk about the 4th one, the better. Now that is on the bottom 100.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Wow. Okay. Sorry, Joel McHale.
Yeah, he's probably the best bit about it, to be honest, but that's because I absolutely love Community and he's basically Jeff in it, so... Okay,
well, we have a somewhat sentimental memory of it there, and then a very sentimental memory of it there, and then we come to Cam.
See, I'm a little bit older than both of you. I'm like Ricardo Montalban here. I'm Grandpa swinging by. So when Spy Kids 2 came out, I was, 21 years old. My friends and I weren't going to see Spy Kids 2. So I'd seen the second one on... This is the year of Spider-Man and Lord of the Rings and what have you. So yeah, I wasn't that excited for Spy Kids 2. And I'm guessing there's a very quick turnaround, Spy Kids 1 to 2. So I'm wondering...
I was thinking that when you said the release year, actually. I didn't realise they were so close together.
Yeah, so I'm even wondering, had I, seen the original Spy Kids when Spy Kids 2 was hitting theaters? It's quite possible not, because I saw Spy Kids on cable TV, one of, the streaming movie channels back in the day. So I don't know if I'd even seen that one when Spy Kids 2 hit theaters. So it was just such a fast turnaround. But... yeah, I never saw it, period.
Unbothered. It's the answer.
Oh, this is your first time?
Yeah, this is the first time I'd ever seen Spy Kids 2, yeah.
I would love to know what I would think about this film if I had no nostalgia attached to it, and I have a funny feeling that whatever Cam's going to say is probably that. I think I'm looking through nostalgia-tinted glasses, but that's fine, it works for me.
Hey, me too, and I'm owning it. Let's keep on that nostalgia ride, because... sure. You're going to need those highs when we talk about this Letterboxd.com synopsis. Because boy, is it a long one.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
Here we go. Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams. Little Spies, Big Attitude. Exploring the further adventures of Carmen and Junie Cortez, who have now joined the family spy business as Level 2 OSS agents. Their new mission is to save the world from a mad scientist living on a volcanic island populated by an imaginative menagerie of creatures. On this bizarre island, none of the Cortez's gadgets work, and they must rely on their wits and each other to survive and save... the day.
That gives away the whole plot.
I didn't write it. It wasn't as long as some of the other ones we come across, but I could take out about 2 sentences of that.
My toes curled at your pronunciation of menagerie.
I was obsessed.
I had to really lean into it because I don't know. It felt right in the moment, guys. How dare you? How dare you? Okay. Well, Cam, I have a lot of questions for you, but I kind of want to know. Do you know how to dance?
No, I actually don't. I'm terrible at it.
Oh, Well, there goes my entire set of lines. Why don't you just tell us how the film was made then?
Okay. So as we established, like Robert Rodriguez, the writer-director of these films, rolled pretty much right into part 2 from part 1. So behind-the-scenes details on this movie are, like, there's not that much because it was just like, reassemble the team, shoot the movie, and we're done. Like, they really cranked it out fast. But he said he envisioned this whole second movie while he was shooting the first, and he referred to the first one and said, basically, we had to make that movie so we could make this one. Which means, essentially, he didn't necessarily want to make an origin film in the first place. He just knew he had to set everything up so that he could make this movie. Because he wanted to just do the big, crazy spy movie with effects and all sorts of stuff where we don't have to explain things. And I think when you look at this movie, like, there's a lot less world building than there was in the first one. They can kind of just take off and run. And he said he knew he wanted to make a Ray Harryhausen adventure like Jason and the Argonauts. And it's impossible to watch this movie and not think of those films if you've seen them. Movies like Clash of the Titans, Jason and the Argonauts, obviously, the Sinbad films. That sort of inspiration is all over these movies. So the production, he said it was just way easier than the first. Everyone was on the same page. They knew what they were doing. He was more comfortable, I think, handling the effects the second time through. And it was pretty easy. In terms of casting, Ricardo Montalban was cast after Rodriguez attended a screening of Wrath of Khan at a Quentin Tarantino hosted film festival in Austin, Texas. And watching Wrath of Khan, he was like, that is Grandpa.
What a get for this film, by the way. I know he's in a wheelchair. But he's still delivering those lines. But then again, you know how I feel about Wrath of Khan.
And it would have just gone over all of the kids' heads. Like, no kid would know what the...
I knew.
Oh, did you?
Because
Oh,
I
well,
was
you were a
born
cool
a
kid.
Star Trek fan.
You were
So
a cool
I was
kid.
like, that's Khan. He's on my screen. He's in my kids' film. And everyone else was like, shut up, Scott. I was like,
Yeah.
Now, do you know why Montalban was in a wheelchair in this movie?
I just assumed it was to do with like age or illness.
Well, he had really traumatic back problems. And so he'd mostly retired from the 90s onwards. And Rodriguez talked him into doing this movie and basically said, don't worry about it. We're going to put you in a wheelchair and have you doing action things that way. So that's how they actually got Montalban on board.
Works for me.
Yeah. And this movie was the first Rodriguez movie shot entirely on HD digital video. Going forward, that's all he would want to use. He became a big proponent for digital video. And this happened because he went and visited George Lucas on the set of Attack of the Clones and was just so impressed with how Lucas was shooting that movie, because Lucas was a pioneer of digital as well. And I think it's impossible to watch Attack of the Clones and not be won over by the style of that film.
I was literally thinking, Attack of the Clones, influenced, inspired, interesting.
Yeah.
It does make sense. When you look at some of the... I know he did a lot of the CG work in this film. Rodriguez, I should say. Pronouns. But it has that kind of sheen to it. That kind of cleanliness that the prequels had. I didn't like about it, really. I preferred the more lived-in universe you had in the originals. And
yeah, me too.
Kind of the sequels.
Yeah, so he just was really impressed with how quickly the turnaround is with using digital cameras, because Rodriguez is a guy who likes to move really fast with his productions. So using film almost doesn't make sense for him. And so he decided to test out this HD footage actually on the first Spy Kids. He did a couple reshoots for the first Spy Kids, a couple scenes here or there, and shot those on HD video and was won over. And so this movie was shot entirely on HD video, which I think I will be touching back on when we talk about the effects integration, which there is a bit of a difference between 1 and 2, I noticed. As for the budget, $38 million, so he just a tiny little bit over the first one. He said, the second one was greenlit very quickly after the first one opened, and he really didn't want that much more money. He just said he wanted to do whatever he wanted to do. Make it big, make it crazy, just don't essentially box him into what the sequel should be. And so, as I said, $38 million budget. Domestically, it did 85.8. International, 33.9, for a worldwide total of 119.7. So, not bad.
Not bad for a kids' film.
Well, I mean, kids' films can make more money than anything. Usually when you look at top 10s now, it's all kids' films.
How was that compared to the original, just out of interest?
I'm glad you asked, Daisy. So the original...
You told me to ask that earlier. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. The original made 147.9. So this was actually a downgrade of $30 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's a shame. I thought it would have built off that sort of fan base there. But maybe when did the first one come out? Was it 2001?
Yeah.
So this is a year turnaround.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wonder if that's actually why it might have made less. Because they typically say the magical number for sequels is 2 years to 3. And I wonder if when you just throw out another one 1 year later, after you've already gone through the promotional cycle of one, the home video promotional stuff, that parents see a commercial for Spy Kids 2 and are like, we just did this.
Well, I think that's a very important thing. And not just home video, but also playing on television and things like that. And I think me and Daisy can probably connect on this one, not so much Cam, but you think about Sky Movies or something like that. This film played all the time.
Yeah.
The first one, certainly. So it was just on like kids' channels.
You don't need to pay money, like a whole family's worth of cinema tickets and God knows what else it costs, when they could just have it on TV, the first one. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
There were certain people that went to cinema, of course, and seen it, but there was a massive generation of people that saw it on home video, I imagine. Kids. And if they've just seen the first one, because at that point it took like a year for things to come out on home video. It wasn't like now where it's 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe they just didn't know, they didn't want to watch a sequel to a film they hadn't seen yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because kids don't necessarily race out and rent it the week it hits video shelves. Like, it's up to your parents ultimately when you see things. There were so many movies as a kid that I didn't see till much later, just because my parents either didn't take us to it or just didn't rent it for us, immediately. And I remember maybe a parallel for more my age group, but the first Ninja Turtles movie comes out in 1990, and that was like, a massive, massive hit. That was like a phenomenon for my generation. And Ninja Turtles 2 came out 1 year later, and it made less than the first one, which you would think, coming off the absolute insanity of the 1990 movie, the 91 one would have done at least equal, and it didn't. So
yeah, because you've not got that breathing room.
I thought you were going to say Casablanca. Gone with the Wind. Yeah, my parents wouldn't rent it. Oh, boy. Oh.
But maybe there's a lesson, too, though, because Ninja Turtles 3 came out 2 years after the second one and made, like, no money. So it's almost like a strike while the iron's hot when it comes to kid stuff.
There's a musical parallel I could make here, but it's very nerdy, so I probably won't go into it. But yeah, I've seen this happen before.
Now I need to know.
Yeah, you can't tease it and then just be like, nah, never mind.
All right, well, I've already I mean, you guys know I'm already a Trekkie, so I might as well keep making myself even weirder. So I really love the 80s pop group Men at Work.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, see, selling it for these two. But, okay, they had their first album, Business as Usual. It won Grammys, it won all kinds of awards. Great album. They released their second album the year afterwards. To make matters worse, because this is an Australian band, they released them in Australia. They moved to America. They released both albums within months of each other.
Oh, why would you do that?
And then no one wanted to hear from them because they had 2 albums out. It was
Too
all
much.
over the shop. Yeah. And then they waited 3 years for the next one, and no one bought the third album at all.
Huh.
So they went from Grammy Award winning to nothing in 3 years.
The worst release strategy I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, it's a
mess.
It's absolute mess. It's a shame because they're all good albums. But anyway, back to Spy Kids.
I now have a question about Men at Work. I know very little about Men at Work. Did they have an ongoing long career, or did they burn out?
They broke up on the third album.
Oh, wow.
It was so bad because of, there was a lot of problems behind the scenes. The lead singer, Colin Hay, who I'm a big fan of, I've seen on tour several times, he kind of went a bit mental with the whole, he won a bunch of Grammys and he was on, all the talk shows every week and stuff, and it went to his head, so he, fired half the band and then hired session musicians, and I think there was a lot of drugs and drink involved, and basically the band imploded during the creation and release of the third album, and now he just tours by himself.
There is no Spy Kids 2 podcast out there that features information on Men at Work. You're welcome, listeners.
This is the USP of this episode.
There's just one person listening going, I really love Men at Work too. Yes, Scott, go on. Or probably not, actually.
It's important to reach those people,
Yeah. I'm doing it for you guys. We're doing it in a land down under.
Yeah.
So, Spy Kids 2 was number 39 for the year at the worldwide box office, right between the Roman Polanski film The Pianist and the Richard Gere Diane Lane film Unfaithful.
That's a strange sandwich there.
Yeah.
Strange sandwich.
Strange sandwich.
Bit of a weird collection. The top 3 for the year, number 1 was Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Number 2 was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And number 3 was Spider-Man. This was also the massive year of spy films. We talked about it just recently with Triple X. So I'm not going to delve into it, but there was like 8 other spy films that came out this year. And Spy Kids fell kind of closer to the front. Die Another Day stood the tallest at number 6. But the list was long, and we actually had Antonio Banderas popping up in the lowest ranked one at number 144, Ballistic, X vs. Sever.
That's on the bottom 100?
Yes! There's a spy film on there!
So it's all coming out now.
There we go. I smell a future guest spot coming up. That's it. I like it. Well, Cam, I think we're finally here. It's getting a bit floopy around here, so I think we should maybe, let's play it straight. I need to know, 2021. Daisy, what do you think about Spy Kids 2? You are our expert, of course.
Yeah, Spy Kids 2 correspondent. Yeah.
That's your new title. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's what I've always wanted. I still love it because, like I said, I've got these nostalgia tinted glasses on. I think it's a hell of a lot of fun. I have to probably give a little bit of context in terms of like what my thoughts are on the first film. I think it's so underrated as not only a kids/family film, but just a film in general. Like, I've spoken about it on a podcast before, and I just think it does so much well as an actual film. And I know you guys have spoken about like the CGI, and now all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, okay. Let that go over my head. But I just think the way it's crafted and what it does is incredible. So the fact that Robert Rodriguez said that he did that to make this one, I'm really shocked at, because in terms of like, this feels like a bit more of a IP money-making sequel than the heart of the first one. So I'm really surprised that and that's how he views them. But to be honest, still, in the way that I guess now it makes sense that it was filmed straight afterwards, I really do feel like this is an immediate continuation. Like, you haven't got that thing where suddenly the kids are like 5 years older and we're pretending that they're only a year older and things like that. The sort of the chemistry's still there between all the family. You've got everyone that's come back. Some of them are in much smaller parts, of course, but then you've got really great secondary characters come in, and a stacked cast. And to be honest, weirdly enough, not as stacked as the third one, which is not a great film, to be honest. But no, I absolutely love it, and I think it's great. And I really like, if we're going to talk about the CG, the fact that he did go more towards the Harryhausen route, because that is so much more stylistic and sort of a love letter to animation in a way that's not, I'm going to try and make this look really good, but actually it looks a bit bad because we've done it on the cheap and I'm not actually a special effects supervisor. So yeah.
But you still like it.
Oh my god, yeah, no, I still love it. I could still quote it, yeah. Standard.
You may have to later.
Oh, I will, don't. No, you've been warned.
Okay, no, works for me. Well, I think we're going to craft a review sandwich here because I know what I'm going to say, so I'm going to put Cam in the middle.
Yeah, I guess my review of the first one is Scott's really presenting it as somewhat legendary at this point.
I think the first one's a really nice, just a pleasant, nice film, and you were like, I'm 14, I don't like kids' films.
I thought the sequel, in some ways, is superior to the original, and in some ways falls behind the first one. I think it's actually mixed in that regard, where there was elements of it that I was like, oh, this is really working. And I thought some of the growing pains for like the kid actors, they felt so locked in this time. I felt like the first one, they're kind of learning the terrain. When you're working with Rodriguez, it's all green screen. So it felt sometimes with the first one, it was two kids being put in a situation that like adults struggle with. You hear all the time about adult actors just dying doing like the Star Wars prequels in front of green screen. Here, it felt like the kids knew exactly how to operate in the Rodriguez kind of, filmmaking style. And just the dynamics between the two of them felt much sharper. And just the world building that he had going on here, I really enjoyed. The whole Harryhausen setup and this adventure kind of quest element. And I'll actually also will say the effects for me worked a lot better this time in terms of like the set pieces. It just felt like, I'm just wondering if it was the digital transition he made, that just the effects blended better into digital filmmaking versus blending very wonky digital effects with film. I wonder if that was part of the problem with the first one, at least for me. So those were all pluses. With the second one, I felt like at a certain point, the pacing didn't quite deliver the way the first one did. The first one is very fast-paced and punchy, and it flies by in 90 minutes. Whereas this one, there was a little bit of a saggy section when we meet up with Buscemi, and we're kind of just waiting to get to where we're going. And also, this movie tries to do a lot. It has a little bit of that sequelitis of like the first one had a core message about the importance of family. You've got the kids trying to save their parents. That's a great, core for a kids movie. Whereas here you had a lot of things going on. You've got kind of like a romance going on. You've got the parents off on their own side story, and then also trying to win the approval of, Carla Gugino's parents, that sort of thing. And it's like, I think thematically we don't have as well-defined a core, but everyone's kind of having so much fun that it doesn't drag the movie down. Because like when you look at a movie, say like Spider-Man 3, which is also doing a lot and has that sort of sequelitis, it gets dragged down energy-wise. I didn't really feel that here.
Well, just to put you on the spot, comparing to the first one, do you think this is a better film, Cam?
I don't... I'm going to really have to mull that one over, because I think in some ways, no, because I think the first one is so propulsive that for a kid, and I've sat and watched movies, with my friends' kids, their attention span is really short. And I'm talking kids, in the 5, 6, 7 kind of age group. And I think they would sit through that first one much easier than they would sections of part 2. So I wonder, as like a young kids entertainment, if 2 is inferior because it just feels a little more drawn out. It doesn't have that rapid fire energy of the first.
Yeah, I set it up like I was going to give this a nice fluffy ending as a sandwich, as I said, but there is a slight twinge of disappointment in my review, which is surprising because I have really fond memories of this film, and I have fond memories of the sort of monsters on the island and all that sort of stuff. But it just feels like I acknowledge that there's like a boggy bit in the middle. I think as soon as Buscemi turns up, which I love seeing Buscemi, great quotable lines, but it just sags. As soon as they get to the island until the ending bit, then the energy picks up again. It's interesting because I think like it's more ambitious than the first one. But in terms of digital, as you've pointed out to us now, Cam, I didn't notice that, but I knew it looked better on the screen. I think like the colors popped more, the world felt better. You look at the OSS building; that's insane. You didn't see that sort of stuff in the first one. Although I do wish that my front doors were spelled OSS.
That's a great design.
And you had to hop on the letters to get to your desk.
Yes.
That seems like a death trap.
That seems like the most unproductive, inefficient office layout I've ever seen in my life.
I just want to see a scene where he gets up to it and then it's just like Donegan to reception, Donegan to, and he just goes, oh, okay, and then hops back down them again.
Yeah. Never mind.
Yeah. Jumps off. Sod it. But like, I had a weird disconnect in this film. I felt like it's missing the antagonism between the brother and sister, which I seem to have remembered being throughout. It isn't the start of the film because she has the hots for the Gary Giggles character. But which is that's fine, but they're not really like fighting each other as much, and I found a lot of the joy in the first one with that because I have siblings. Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, like they're saying stuff to each other, but they're working as more of a team now against the other spies, and I think I missed that charm. It's a good word, Daisy. Thank you. And I also think like much as the digital has upgraded, some of it actually stood out to me more in this film than it did the first one. Like, there's the scene where they're fighting the skeletons on the rock face. That just looked like something I could probably render on my 10-year-old laptop. And it just...
It kind of looks like they've layered... You could literally, like, lift up. You know, like when you see Disney animators, like, with the sort of perspex, like, you could literally, like, lift it up and see how it's been layered on.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, but I feel like there's a little bit of charm to it. But then I think if that's, again, because it's like, that's how I always knew it to be. If you're watching this off the bat and saying, is this a good film? I do feel like that would be quite jarring, seeing it like that. Yeah.
It definitely dates it to 2002, and that's a shame. Go on, Cam.
Yeah, that whole sequence is probably the most Jason and the Argonauts moment in the entire film. So it often feels like they're trying to replicate the Harryhausen actual sequence. And that one, you're working with stop motion, which also has a little more of a physical weight to it. Whereas when you have CG here, I get totally what you mean. Like, it does feel a little more cartoony than it probably was intended to, just because cartoons, CG animation doesn't have the weight that a physical model that you're moving around does. So it didn't bother me, because I can't say when I watch Jason and the Argonauts now, and I only watch it maybe like, I've seen it a few times, but I watched it maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. The sequence doesn't necessarily look flawless now when you watch Jason and the Argonauts, but there is a fun to it. And I think they managed to capture the fun, if not quite the technical prowess that, you had in the original Argonauts.
Yeah, I think this film has just lost a little bit of the charm of the first one. And it's still got like you say, the dynamics in the family, the inclusion of the grandparents is great. I like the world building of the OSS. That's nice to know that there's more to it. You've got the opposite spies, the president's daughter. Shooter McGavin is the president. That's priceless in itself.
It means we've lost George Clooney as the president.
Well, apparently he comes back. Apparently this is the only Spy Kids film he isn't in.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's in the third one. Like, blinking you'll miss it cameo, I believe, if I remember rightly.
Maybe he was actually behind a black bar the whole time. We just couldn't.
Yeah. Just like the one, like the letterbox I decided, like.
Yeah, exactly. He was there, but we'll never know.
Well, you can tell Rodriguez has these low budgets because he shoots a lot of these adult actors in probably like 2 or 3 days. Because like there's a lot of people popping up. Cheech Marin shows up, for example, and you could have shot his scenes in like 2 days. And that happens a lot through Spy Kids 2. And I noticed just like the parents feel less used in this one than the first one. And that's kind of, to me, one of the real strengths of the first one is that the core dynamic of the 4 of them. And I did miss that here. I also thought that and wrote it down. But it's interesting because in the first one, it's the parents then get captured by Floop for Alan Cummings. That's his full name.
Yeah. They get captured by Alan Cummings, and then our Spy Kids rescue them. Whereas this is the other way around. The Spy Kids are the ones who get lost, and the parents go to save them. And you would think that's a nice twist on it, but for some reason they just get lost in the shuffle.
They spend a lot of time on the submarine or whatever you want to call it to find the kid.
Yeah,
and it makes sense, Cam, what you're saying. Like they probably blocked all of their stuff in one go. And I imagine in the original script, they had them in different places and like getting on the island and then they just went, that's too much money, that's too much time, they've got other stuff to do, this is a sequel, let's just do it all on this one. And it makes me wonder, is that interesting to kids, like that whole subplot? I wouldn't say it's... I think there's some really funny jokes in there, but I'm talking about like watching it when like I got a bit older and was like sort of like a tween, like I found it quite... I don't think like proper young kids would care at all about that subplot, especially because it's stuck in one green screened set ultimately.
I think that's a really interesting question. It's something we didn't really explore in the first one, but a kids film to me has to work not only for kids but for the adults that take them. Mm-hmm. And I think the first one delivered.
Ultimately, it's a family film. I think it worked so well, the first one.
Yeah. The second one has those jokes, like you say, with the parents, like when they're trying to find the kids, and Ricardo Montalban's like, "Oh, I do this." Yeah. It's like, "Shut up, Grandpa," and da, da, da. We've all had overbearing parents. We all understand that, but I don't think they play it up as much in this one. I don't think there's as many jokes for adults. It's more for the kids, and I think maybe that's why I've bumped on it this time.
Also, when you look at the first one, you do spend time with the parents when they're in Floop's, prison and whatever, and their escape. There's a lot of like visual trickery going on to make it seem kind of exciting. Like if you're a young kid, you probably don't care that much about the parents, but you're watching them deal with like death traps and jump over gaps in the floor and stuff like that.
Yeah. They have loads of gadgets and stuff. There's a lot of like just traveling in this one. There's some great gadgets, but the first one
Yeah.
was like overwhelming with gadgets. That there was, and I think the pace helped as well. Like you said, Cam, like there was always something going on, and even when it was these subplots that they probably don't care about, there was some visual. Like they had like the laser that was it like when they captured them, they had the crayon that was like that melted the bars and things like that. There's always these little things that kids will go, oh god, that's so cool, I want that. Whereas it doesn't seem to happen as much in this one.
And I wonder if part of that is the first one is so much a spy film.
Mm-hmm.
It really wants to embrace that world of James Bond style, kind of cartoonish spy action. Whereas this one, it follows more of a adventure film sort of mode, which one of the things about adventure movies is it's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of walking. You have characters referencing Lord of the Rings in this movie, and it's like, those movies, a lot of it is about the journey, and so we spend a lot of time with the characters exploring this island. We have the parents journeying to the island. It's not like a connected series of set pieces the way the first one was.
I will say about the gadgets, I did really want to get on board with the gadgets, but when the main gadget of the film is a hairband and I don't have any hair anymore, it really hurts me.
And also the plot is that their gadgets don't work.
Yeah.
For the bulk of the runtime, so I kind of just clocked I understand the point of it, but it kind of taken away half the fun by doing that a little bit.
Kids want gadgets. We liked having those things. It's toys that we played with. I will probably close out my review just by actually reading someone else's review, and that is Marianne Johansson, who actually joined us recently on the show. I stumbled upon her top line review, and it actually made me laugh, and it kind of summed up what I thought. It's bigger, it's dumber, it's more obvious, it's less fun, it's a sequel.
Where's the lie?
We should say, though, Spy Kids 2 was fairly well reviewed. The Spy Kids franchise would face much harsher reviews in the future, but at this point, critics did genuinely seem to enjoy part 2 most of the way across the board. I think the first one is like a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think this one had a 70s. So
I can believe that. But let's pivot into the good stuff. Let's talk about what we like. So, Daisy, you're the guest. You'll go first. Give us a thing you liked about the film.
Well, I just like I just find it so comforting to watch. From
the whole film. Okay, till,
well, I mean the credits, the song. Yes. Do you realise? I'm just trying to think. Can I just touch this because I actually really like this end bit. So you said it was out in 2002.
Yeah.
So I would have been 8 when this came out, and I think as an 8-year-old, I was obsessed with Carmen. Like, I was like, I want to be her. So like from the years that I then had it on DVD, like I just loved that little section because I was just like, right, you've got the cool spy girl who's now a pop star. This is amazing. What a role model for me, she says at the age of 12. And I just thought the song was really catchy. But that aside, I think that I really like the characters of Carmen and Junie. And I think that is because of the age that I watched these at. And I know you mentioned with the first one about like you didn't necessarily like agree on whether the performances were good. I'd be intrigued to find out what you think about this one. But for me, I just found them so relatable, and it was so cool to see them doing stuff in both films that was just like, oh, they're doing stuff that I'm usually watching like adults doing. They're making it fun, they're making it accessible. And I really did like that's why I do feel like it's missing a little bit in this one in terms of like the riff off each other, but then they do have that with Gary and Gertie. And I was also obsessed with the fact that Gertie's hair span when I was a kid. So it's just, I think for me now watching it, the main thing that I love is that level of comfort, because I knew as a kid I like really related to it, and it like just made, do you know what it is? It makes you feel like, especially at the age that I was when I was watching it, I was just like, oh, this is like an adult film for kids. This isn't like, you know, we all love like the Pixars and everything, which is a family film together. I felt like I wasn't being talked down to, and I was being told like, you can enjoy like these kinds of films as well, and they're really cool, and like you want everything that's on screen and stuff. For me, I think I do prefer the first one. So there is going to be a few things that drop off of this one, but just the fact that, they've got such great castings, like Steve Buscemi, I mean, come on. In a film called Spy Kids 2, Island of Lost Dreams, we have him saying, I wanted to get the quote right, so I brought it up. Oh no, it's gone. But what he says, like, it's just, this is way too serious.
I know exactly the quote you're going to say.
Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created here on earth? If you said that to someone and said, what film is that from? Do you think anyone would know that is from Spy Kids 2, Island of Lost Dreams?
I sat up in my chair when he said that. I was like, you know what? This is what happens, though, when you get kind of a renegade filmmaker making kids' movies. He's going to inject ideas that a, team of Disney writers would be like, don't say that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Maybe that's why it connected to me, because it was like, it's not talking down to me. It's not cutting out these... It's bringing together sort of the stuff that and I think what's good about this is it does change up the genre a little bit, as you say, Carla. This is a little bit more of an adventure side. So it was nice that I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting another chunk. The first one was more spy. This one's a bit more adventure, but it's not dumbing it down for me. It's not, the kids stuff is silly, but the adult stuff is, I get it, and I laugh at it too. So I don't know. I just think it's great that someone like him didn't hold back, because he was like, I'm making a film that's for kids. It's more that he's making a film that's appropriate for kids and that kids would like. But ultimately, I think anyone can really enjoy it. It's just a shame that I think it's a bit dated, so it does take you out of enjoying it if you haven't seen it before when you were younger, maybe.
I remember an anecdote. I posted it on our Instagram, but I didn't mention it in the Spy Kids episode, that when they were doing the first one, Robert Rodriguez took Alexa Vega to see Mission Impossible 2. And he kept saying to her, you're going to beat that guy. You're going to beat that guy. And he was trying to essentially create a competition between her and Tom Cruise, because he said he did not want her to compete against children. He wanted her to come across on screen as an action hero every bit as believable as what a Tom Cruise could do, or any other, spy actor. Vin Diesel's playing Triple X the year this movie comes out, so like the same thing. Like, she's on equal footing as a Vin Diesel as well.
Yeah, and I think that, as you say, that definitely came across in terms of, like, it's just nice to have those role models for kids. They weren't, they were out there saving the day. Like, first one was saving the parents. This time they're hacking into the... in the first 5 minutes, I think she hacks into the Pentagon by, like... on her mum's, like, computer, which is just so... There's something so kitsch about some of these gadgets, like, because, like, how many years on from it now? And, like, the parents sort of, like, computers at their desks, and the mums is, like, all makeup, and I'm like, I'm not even mad about it, this is... There's something fun about this still, even if it feels really dated. And but yeah, as you say, like, because they've set up it to be, this isn't, I wouldn't say a kids film, kids acting in a kids film. It's about what they're doing and what, and I think you said obviously in the first one, it is a love letter to spy films. It's not taking the piss out of them or being like, look at us, we're in a spy film. Again, I don't think that attitude's in this one at all either. So that's really nice to it's just really sincere, but also knows it's having fun, which is the best of both worlds.
Well, I completely agree, and you can tell Buscemi is being sincere when he delivers that immortal line.
For sure.
I actually wrote it down myself because it's a great quote.
So
I might change my Twitter bio to that just for the sake of it.
God.
Really. I want to sort of wind back to your bringing up the end credits music, because I'm not going to let that escape. I will actually just say, the reason why I'm chastising it is because it's been in my ear for over a day. I keep asking myself who, what, where, when, and why do I delight in, and it's there. But I do remember there was a karaoke version on the DVD.
There was! Oh my God.
So I can imagine, I was 15 when this film came out. It's a tiny bit of difference here, kind of in the middle of you two then. And I was in my full grunger phase at that point. I was black hair dye. I was going for it. There's no way I was going to be singing this song. But if I was 8, and at 8 I loved the Spice Girls, and I still do, and I would be loving this song too. So it crosses boundaries. It's a catchy little tune.
Mm-hmm. And I also love the gadget that she has, which means you can sing in different languages like this. Brilliant.
Not sure about that dancing belt, though.
Yeah, maybe not. Everyone has a limit, and that was the limit.
Normally when we cover movies, I watch them the night before or something like that, and this one I didn't have time, so I had to watch it this morning. So it was like a crawl out of bed, make breakfast, and sit and watch Spy Kids 2.
That's my weekly routine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure. I'm sitting there though, watching this dance number, 41 years old, just like, what is my life? Where
How did
am
I get here?
What is this? Yeah, like, is this all there is?
Oh, is this cinema?
Well, it's not in the bottom 100, so it's got to be doing okay.
Certainly not, and it shouldn't be.
It feels like the sole moment for me, and look, it's a credit sequence, so I'm not going to hold anything against the movie either way about it, but it feels like the sole moment to me that is like entirely for the kids. Like, I think most of the adults in the room are just like mentally checked out during this whole sequence, but whatever.
I can get along with it.
Yeah, I wonder if they were like, yeah, let's go, I can't have this in my head. And I bet you parents all over the world were singing that song.
Especially when 8-year-old Daisy was playing it on karaoke version for the 10th time in a row. And
oh my God, my poor dad. I need to ask him and see if he remembers it actually. I'm sure that he does.
Just send him the song and see what he replies.
Oh my God, I shouldn't I? Just no other context.
Yeah, just straight up, just DM it, and then if he replies with a furious emoji, you know what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll send you a video back of him singing it, like just
that
a cappella.
Would be great. That would be great.
I'm down. That's great. Well, Cam, what about you? Something you really enjoyed about the film?
Well, I wanted to just touch briefly on just the dynamic between Carmen and Junie in this one. That I actually liked how they evolved it, where Carmen is getting older. She's noticing, this boy, Gary, and has a crush on him. She has a line that's a little cringy about, I can fix him, or something like that. You're like, ugh.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That's hilarious.
Definitely written by adults, that line, yeah.
Yeah. But just the fact that, like, we now see she's getting a little bit older, but Junie is still young. And so you have that divide by age. And I actually think that was a really interesting thing to delve into, and how, at the end of the day, she does choose, her brother versus someone who's more her peer. So I thought, in terms of evolving a dynamic, I actually really liked that about this movie. I thought it was very effective. As for just what I enjoyed, honestly, the world building. Just this entire island of creatures, and just how it, as an adult, it created fun for me, where they introduced some of the creatures, the spider monkey and what have you. But there'd be other ones they didn't name that I would be sitting there trying to figure out what they would be called as they're, flying across the screen. I was like, all of them are visually really interesting. Robert Rodriguez has a really quirky style. He created the thumbs for the first one. And this feels like he's continuing that sort of evolution. I love the magnet men in this movie. I thought that was a ton of fun. But there was like one creature where it was the pig that flew. And I was staring at that going, what is that called? Now, I wrote down pigeon, as in combo of pig and pigeon.
That's good.
And then they said spork, and I was like, well, you see, much simpler. That's why he's a genius and I'm not.
I don't know how I feel about the name spork. I think I prefer your version.
Thank you.
Pigeon's wittier, I think, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just loved how, if you're going to make an adventure movie for kids, we've seen a lot of adventure movies, I'm sure, between the three of us, where there's kind of like one set piece or something that you're like, yeah, that was okay. And then there's not a lot there. Whereas here, despite having like no money, he's just filling up this island with so many original creatures and sequences, battles between these, beasts, and then the skeleton stuff. So I just really appreciated that he went all out. If he's going to make a Harryhausen tribute, he's going to make a full-on one.
Even like the bit where they go into like, I don't know if it's like a tomb or something, and they can hear each other's thoughts. It's just like so like off book, like just a lot of fun, and it's just this little set piece. It doesn't get referenced again. It doesn't amount to anything for the plot, but it just gives them something to do as brother and sister that maybe sort of contributes to the character development a little bit more, bringing them closer together. Because as you say, I think where they, that age difference means that they're probably pulling apart a little bit. The whole thing is like, how can we bring them back together. They're not arguing as much. They're not sort of like fighting and, you know, bickering between each other, but maybe they don't understand each other as much anymore either. So I thought it was those little things, little nice touches, I thought.
Yeah, it has a good, you know, sort of sense of like the importance of like communication between family. There's, I think, lessons to draw from kids. I just don't think they're as well refined as the first one, which really established its core lesson it was teaching kids, whereas here you've got multiple going on at the same time.
I think the only thing I would shout out that we haven't mentioned already is, I mean, Cam mentioned the world building. I want to mention the practical world building. We're talking the actual sets they used here. I mean, there are some green screen usage, and I'm not a big fan of that. But like the dragonfly interiors, some of the interiors of the OSS building that wasn't CG created, very practical. Like the doors I mentioned earlier. I imagine they were real doors, and it just added to the world, and it made it feel maybe a little bit shiny, but also just kind of cool. And this is a kid's film. It felt cool. You wanted to work in it with Antonio Banderas in that office.
What about the treehouse? The treehouse is so good.
The treehouse.
I wanted that treehouse so badly. Still do.
I one of my favourite scenes in the film. I should have mentioned earlier when we were talking about the two, but like when Junie gets fired, and he goes up into the treehouse and he goes, "Yeah, well, at least I'll have time to work on my projects." And it's like I feel like that as an old man now. How dare this kid have that problem at 10?
They did a little sort of foreshadowing to 3 in that scene where he goes, "Oh, maybe I'll set up my own detective agency," and she's like, "Don't think so small, Junie." That was a little nice touch I hadn't noticed as much before.
Well, at this rate, I imagine number 3 comes out in 2003.
Yeah, it does.
Does it actually?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
I mean, that's maybe where they went wrong, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even more impressive, so 2003, Spy Kids 3 comes out. Also, Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Rodriguez fired out 2 movies the next year.
Sweet Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. That's tip my hat to the guy. Well done.
Productivity at its finest.
And he's like Mr. 10 jobs on the set as well. It's not like he's just directing and then like, cut, see you later, I'm going to the bar. Yeah, okay. Fair play. Well, yeah, but so I said about the practical sets were fantastic, and we are looking to speak to one of the assistants who worked on the film who had a lot to do with the practical sets as well for one of our interviews, either with us or the third film. So look out for that as well. That's in the works currently. But like also the gadgets were kind of cool. The ones that we did have. Not that we really got to see them in action. The wristbands and all that sort of stuff. The hand climbing things in the start of the film. In the Troublemaker
Great
theme park, which was a bit of a nice nod there, wasn't it, to his own film studio?
Yeah, that was quite cute.
Yeah. I actually was more impressed by the magnet stuff than I was by the gadgets. That whole sequence where you have the guys all sticking to the bottom of the ship and flying away, I was like, that's really cool.
Well, you're a guy who never is seen without a hat on, so you kind of got those guys.
I did, yes. Also, I'm a big fan of the ICP, who, of course, wondered, how do magnets work? Spy Kids 2 tells you.
Yeah, there you go.
Miracles. Miracles, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. I suppose we'll divert onto maybe some quibbles we have that we haven't mentioned already. I'll just throw it in. Some of the green screen work was irritating for me. Like, it brought me out of it. I'm sure as a kid, I loved it. And I'm sure I did. But watching it again as an adult, and especially if you're an adult in the cinema with your kids when this came out in 2002, I think you could probably see through a lot of it, and I think that's annoying.
I don't know. Like, to me, most of the green screen stuff was more effective in this movie than the first one. So it felt like they were really refining. Like, here's the thing. Spy Kids 2 does not look, say, visually on par with, you know, Spider-Man, which came out the same year. Like, it just visually isn't as impressive. But it felt like, to me, it didn't jut out and seem jarring in the way that the first one sometimes did. This one, it blended together, even if I am looking at it going, okay, like clearly that's CG or that's a green screen. It just felt like it belonged more within the world. Like, I just think Rodriguez nailed down exactly what his world should look and feel like with this one more so.
And I wonder if it's because it's set in a mythical setting that it kind of blends a little bit more in terms of, because the other one, it's like wherever they live and then, you know, going to Floop's castle or whatever, but that's super cartoony. And then you've got, like sort of like real world scenarios where you've got the jetpacks and whatnot, and then you've got the super cartoony thing. This feels like it's kind of like you're in that world. You've kind of, maybe there's a little bit more of a suspension of disbelief in terms of, oh, I'm in a mythical place. I'm expecting to see things that I wouldn't usually expect to see. Whereas if you're looking at the first Spikers, you're like, and have seen versions of jetpacks and whatnot since that have been done a lot better and look real. Maybe that's why it looks a bit schlocky in the first one.
Maybe I should have tempered my expectations when I saw a Slizzard on the screen, you know.
Yeah.
But Daisy, what about you? Maybe a quibble you have.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, I just don't think it's as tight as the first one in terms of being like a whole heartwarming story from beginning to end, where I really feel like them. And I'm so shocked what you said about Robert Rodriguez is like, yeah, I just wanted to get that one out of the way to make this one. It seems so bizarre because that one seems so much more full of heart and a proper sort of homage to the spy genre, and just everything about it seemed really thought out. And this one, I feel, as much as I like it, does seem like a quickly done, let's get it into theatres and make a bit more money. And of course, I'm not saying it's a heartless cash grab at all, but more so it feels cheaper and kind of more, where can we put them next? What can we do next? Who else can we bring in? Let's have another version of them who are blonde and evil with other kids. You know, it's always that, it's that sequelization of more, bigger, better, quotes, doesn't ever seem to, more often than not, it isn't better. It's just they've spent more money, but maybe lost a bit of heart, and it kind of falls a bit flatter. I personally still love it, and I think it benefits from it being done straight afterwards in terms of the performances and the cast. But maybe if they hadn't rushed into it, they could have taken their time a little bit more on, because I know you said like there seems to be a bit of a dip in the middle of the story, and I think I've pinpointed why that is for me, is that obviously they discover Steve Buscemi's character right in the middle, and to me that feels like a third act reveal. Obviously they fall down the volcano, which is hilarious when they're talking about like how long have we been falling for, and he's like, I don't know, my watch doesn't tell time. It's like one of my favorite callbacks, because he's just so sassy and I love it. And it's kind of like they meet him, and then the other kids come in, and then all of a sudden they've got their third act sort of action point to go, and then all of a sudden you're seeing the rest of the island, and it's just like, this feels really like stop start. I wonder if they hadn't, sure, don't leave him as a reveal to the end, but maybe teased him a little bit more, be like, oh my god, who is it? Maybe they saw someone live there but didn't meet him yet, and they kind of piece things together rather than be told what. Maybe that would have been a bit more of a spy thing, that they're the ones discovering this mystery, and they're like, right, we need to do this, we need to find this person, rather than they go there and then it's like, Steve what's the word I'm looking for? I was about to say exploitation. That's not the word. Exposition. Buscemi, I'm going to tell you everything about this island. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now what? Now we're doing like a whole other half of the film. So maybe that's where the pacing kind of got for me. And to me, the third act with the Transmuker as the MacGuffin just falls a bit flat. I don't really care by that point about that side of the plot, about the villain or anything like that. I'm not interested in personally.
How have we gone an hour without even saying the word Transmuker?
Transmuker, which I think should be the new word for MacGuffin. I think Transmuker is the word for that. Is so much more fun.
Let's make it a thing, Cam. If we say MacGuffin again, we're Transmukering it.
I'm down with that. Although I was like writing on my notes, I'm like Transmuker, and then the next time Transmuger ? Because I kept going back and forth as to the spelling of this. But yeah, for me, like, my weak point was the Transmuker stuff, which I don't really understand what it does. It stops powers, I guess.
And it cloaks the island as well? Or is that
it's kind of an all-in-one, I guess. It just does anything you want it to.
It's a MacGuffin.
Yeah. So, like, that sort of plot, for the villain is not that interesting. Like, I think the first one had a stronger sense of what Floop was up to, and Minion, of course, who was the main villain. Whereas here I was like, okay. And then also, like, no offense to Mike Judge, who's, created some fantastic television shows, Beavis and Butthead, Silicon Valley, King of the Hill. But, like, as your main villain, he's not strong. Like, he appeared in the first one briefly, and it's almost like once they cast that character in the first, they're like, well, there's the villain, and they were stuck with a guy who
what can we do with him now?
Yeah.
He's like, I want to come back, and you're like, oh, okay, well, we need a bigger part for you then. You could be the villain. It kind of feels a bit like that.
I think it's really interesting, and I haven't seen Spy Kids 3, but that they cast Stallone as the villain in the third one, which is more of a movie star presence, whereas in this movie, he's, a little flat.
The Donovan Giggles character's in 3 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, it's just, they, the friend version of nepotism. I don't know if there is one. The whole Adam Sandler vibe of just casting your gang of mates in every film.
And it's like if you cast Seth MacFarlane and stuff, which they did for quite a while. He would pop up in all these voice cameos and things. Every time he brings like a really crazy performance to what he's doing, and like Mike Judge, you kind of get a guy like he doesn't really bring a lot to the character.
Yeah.
I suppose I'll jump in for another quibble I have, and that is the lack of usage of the guest cast. It felt like more of a bigger world in the first one. You had Floop, and there was a lot of Floop, but there was a lot of Uncle Felix. He was in it more. But this film, you've also got the Giggles, who play a big part, but you've still got Floop as back. He's in all of 2 scenes, and I always want more Floop. I mentioned Christopher McDonald as the president, who is always a riot in anything I've ever seen him in. But, you've also got, Danny Trejo is back in this film, and he's in one scene, and then that, of course, that famous post-credit scene. And that's it. You just feel like if you've got this bench, you might want to use it a wee bit more. And also the parents, and I didn't mention this in the first review, but, when it comes to Antonio Banderas and Carla Gugino, I hashtag free some goals. Those two are just the most good-looking people on screen, I will just say. And it's like, wow, why are they not on screen more? I just want to stare at both their faces.
You're right. I don't think they have as much to do. That what they do perfectly, in my opinion. But yeah, it would be nice to have seen them do a bit more in this one.
I was hoping you were going to say Danny Trejo, Cheech Marin, threesome goals.
Yeah.
That could be fun. You never know.
I do agree with you, though. It felt more like the supporting adult characters. A lot of them were just kind of cameos. Whereas they would like build a scene around them in the first one. The whole dinner at Danny Trejo's house in the first one. It's an actual scene they're building in terms of establishing this character. Whereas here, pops in, gives them a watch, disappears. Cheech Marin pops up, disappears. Yeah,
they're really sidelined, aren't they? I wonder if the point was that they wanted to make this the vehicle for the 2 leads, the 2 kids, and kind of now that they're growing up a little bit and they have their own adversaries, it was kind of like going for that vibe. But you're right, it's kind of just a shame because they could have utilized the cast a lot more.
I wonder if it was a little bit like the Richard Donner Superman, where when that movie was coming out, they're like, starring Marlon Brando, and it's all about putting the big actor up front. And then when you get to Superman 2, they're like, nope, Christopher Reeve's the star. Like, that's what this movie's about. And I wonder if that was a little bit of the case with the first one. You really sell it as Antonio Banderas, Carla Gugino, and all of the supporting cast.
Because the parents are the ones buying the ticket, right? That you've got to market to the parents, arguably more so than the kids.
Yeah, and so with the second one, they go, okay, the brand's established, the kids are the stars. I wonder if that was more of the thinking there.
Yeah.
I can hear the listeners at home saying it's called Spy Kids. And
yeah.
There is that. I just would like to stare at both their faces some more. And Danny Trejo. I'll stare at his face too. It's all good. I did have a question. I know the third film is 3D.
Oh, yes.
I'm interested to see how I can get it in 3D. I want to see if I can find a way to watch it in 3D and experience it, because I think I saw it in the cinema in 3D, but I'd like to experience it again.
I wish I still had... I can see the case. I can see that it was a thick case because it had the red and blue 3D glasses. It had 4 sets. in the DVD. It had a 2D disc and a 3D disc. And I am just absolutely distraught thinking that I don't have that anymore. Because I would love to just awkwardly wear the paper glasses that never fit your face properly and experience that in the how it was meant to be, meant to be watched. Full intention.
I need to find this. I need to find this disc. It must be on eBay,
surely.
Didn't Spy Kids 3D also have scratch and sniff cards in theaters?
I think that was 4.
Was that 4? Okay.
Because it's 4D all the time in the world. So,
right.
Yeah. Which we'll get to. But I had elements and moments in this film, especially at the Troublemaker Park at the start, where I felt like that this was trying to be in 3D, and I wondered if it ever was. You didn't mention it at the start, but like it really felt like it was doing stuff like the vomit was heading towards the screen. I'm gesturing at the screen that we're recording on, but no one can see me doing that on the podcast. But there you go.
Great podcasting, Scott. Well, it's entirely possible because Rodriguez was testing out HD video on the first Spy Kids, so maybe he was looking at shooting with 3D techniques on Spy Kids too. Mm-hmm. I think that's entirely possible.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to know. Then at least my eyes still work. But this film runs at 100 minutes.
Yeah.
And this was my main question. Do you think 100 minutes is at least 10 minutes too long for a kids' film?
It's so hard to say because we've referenced Pixar movies. There's a lot of Pixar movies that are actually a little bit longer nowadays. And then parents will take their kids in droves to see the Disney Beauty and the Beast remake, the live action version, which is like 2.5 hours. So I think it just depends if the kids are wrapped up in it. Because when I was really young, I liked watching Star Wars and Return of the Jedi, and those movies are 2 hours or over. So
I feel like it's about pacing, because if you have a 90-minute film that's paced badly or just isn't very good, it can feel like 3 hours. But if you've got a 3-hour film that's wonderful and paced greatly and full of great stuff, it can feel like an hour. So I do think it's a pacing thing. When I was watching it, I was just like, I don't know I can't remember what the first one is runtime wise, but it's like hour 40. I was like, okay. I feel like if anything sort of like 85 to sort of like 95 minutes, I'm like, oh, what a treat. And I'm like, as a film fan, that seems really like contradictory in terms of the fact that I'm like, oh yes, let's watch less of the film, please. But I think I think an hour 40 is all right, because I don't think this film is necessarily for young kids. I think it's more sort of, older primary, early secondary kind of age range, and families generally. So. And
they do pull back. The third one's like 80 minutes. So maybe Rodriguez did learn a lesson with this one. I don't know.
Maybe he spent all his budget on Elijah Wood. And Sylvester Stallone.
Lord of the Rings was still going on, wasn't it, at this point? In 2003, was it still coming out?
The last one comes out in 2003. And actually, I think Stallone may have been cheap at that point when they did the third one, because he had done like Detox and Avenging Angelo and stuff like that. I think his career was in the toilet at that point.
I mean, I'm not going to I don't know either of those, so I think that proves your point.
Yeah.
You'll be covering them soon on the W Rated podcast.
I'm sure I will. Yeah, we've got like a whole Sylvester Stallone section.
Well, I think before we wrap up and get to the knock list, I'm just going to throw it out to anyone. Any final notes, final questions about the film? Daisy, anything to add?
I'm really proud of myself that I can say Carmen's full name like she does in the password for the safe house in the first one, and I can't remember. Did she do it for the tree house in the second one?
Maybe.
I think so.
So yeah, I'm very not embarrassed, and probably should be, that I know her full name. I don't think I know Junie's, but hers is Carmen Elizabeth Juanito Echo Sky Bravo Cortez, and it's like my favorite thing to say.
Wow, that was a moment there. I'm glad I was here for that.
I'm glad other people enjoy it, because it probably should be something I'm ashamed of, to be honest. But I'm not. I love it.
I know Junie's middle name was like Rodriguez's own kid's name.
Oh, really?
So it's like,
that's sweet.
Yeah, I think Rocket and Racer, and they all start with R. I can't remember what the other ones were.
Yeah. Rocket Rebel Racer.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Love it.
Wow. We've dived deep into Spy Kids too. Cam, what about you? Any final notes?
Okay, well, I'll note that at one point Junie picks up the fertility idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark and then hurls it aside. That was fun. Maybe George Lucas lent him that when he was visiting the set of Attack of the Clones. I have no idea. Also, we haven't really talked about them, and so I'll bring them up now. The Giggles kids. Did they work for you guys?
I got a giggle out of them.
I think they could have been better.
I'm sorry, I'll leave.
if I'm viewing it from an adult watching this film, like critically, I don't think they bring much to it other than like an adversary for them to be competitive against. As a kid, it worked for me. Probably fancied the boy when I was a child, and I loved Gertie Giggles because, like I said, she can fly with her hair. So that's every young girl's dream.
And boy.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's how Scott lost his hair, was trying to do that.
I knew it.
It's too soon, Cam. It's too soon.
I wonder if these kids, if you'd brought the Giggle kids, I don't know if they're in part 3, so maybe they are, I have no idea. But like, if you brought them back in another film, if they would feel like they're delivering a little more, just because they'd be more comfortable the second time around, like the way I felt the main kids were in this one. But I thought the Giggle kids were fine. Like, they're more there to set up the dynamic between, Junie and Carmen. So they deliver. But yeah, they were, functional.
I like the exasperated sister thing. She's sort of done with his nonsense. Yeah. It's a shame that she kind of switches back and forth at the end. That gets a bit winding. But I enjoyed the dynamic. It was nice to have competent spies versus competent spies. Mm-hmm. They seem to have learnt a lot from the first film.
As we all did.
Yeah.
About ourselves, mostly, yes. I had 2 notes. One was, if you recall the OSS meeting at the start, all the adults got knocked out, and I wrote it down as they all got spectered.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, just a call to the recent No Time to Die film, where the entire Spectre organization, spoilers, got killed at the same meeting. Silly them having all their same agents in the same room at once. Ugh. Silly billies. And
MI5. Silly billies.
It's a kids film. It's a kids film. This is the sort of thing you should be saying. And the other note I had was about the president's daughter.
Right.
Yeah. What's her name again?
Taylor Momsen.
Taylor Momsen. Oh.
Now, she's really fun in this film. She's barely in it, but a lot of people might watch this film and go, I know this face, and I don't know why. And that is because she is the lead singer of a pretty famous rock band now called The Pretty Reckless.
They're great.
And yeah, she kicks ass.
She's very different now. If you were to compare the pictures of her in Spy Kids 2 and The Grinch, and then what she does now. But like, I saw them play at Reading one year, and I had a bit to drink, and I was shouting out, I was like, the president's daughter, or like Jenny from Gossip Girl, or Cindy Lou Who, like just on rotation, in the hope that she...
Do you still dance ballet?
Yeah.
Do you still dance ballet?
In the hope that she would acknowledge, which obviously she didn't, so...
Well, I've reached out to her agent for an interview. I doubt we're going to hear back. Yeah. But I just think that's a nice, funny moment, and one hell of a glow-up.
Yeah.
I had no idea who this girl was, or who, like, Taylor Momsen really is.
And now he's a massive fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I did appreciate that the president's daughter, though, when we cut to her in her room at one point, has, like, a doll that looks like Junie. I was like, that's odd.
Oh, I don't think I noticed that.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, just to point out, you've got 2 people here who have watched this film multiple times and, like, recited lines, and we never saw that, and then Cam watches it once.
Eagle eyes.
He's like, yeah, check out that one thing in the background for all of 5 seconds.
Not even the background, it's kind of in the foreground.
Oh God.
It's near the end. It's when she's watching the message from him.
Yeah, I knew what scene you meant. I can't place it. I can't think.
Does this mean that Cam is the biggest Spy Kids 2 fan out of all of us?
I think so.
Oh, jeez.
Not self-proclaimed, obviously, but...
No. You've earned that title, Cam, I think.
Sure.
Well, let's hop in the Dragonfly and shoot on over to the island of the knock list. Cam, as we have a guest, can you just run us through what the knock list is?
Yes, the knock list is the tortured acronym for Need to See Official Classics of the Slizzards podcast, where every week we talk about a movie and then decide if it belongs on the pantheon of all-time great spy films. So movies that have made it in GoldenEye, Goldfinger, North by Northwest, and the original Spy Kids.
Ah, good. Are you convinced, Cam, right? Because it wasn't... You have to agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to, when there's two of us, we have to agree. So I really had to negotiate that one.
Work.
So that was one of my proudest moments of the year. So that's
doing the Lord's work, I would say.
Thank you.
Was that our longest debate over a knock list? I think it was.
Either that or the Bourne Supremacist Ultimatum. Bourne Ultimatum took a while as well.
Yeah.
That was 4 of us shouting different opinions at each other. So that was heated.
It was.
But okay, I think I might know Daisy's answer, but Daisy,
you say that.
Spy Kids
you
2.
say that.
Well,
but if I'm going to be purely objective, I'd probably say no. But if it was the first one, I would absolutely say yes. Because unapologetically, I think that's a very good film. This, I think, is just me having fun and loving it. And me being like, yeah, I used to watch this all the time. It's comfort. I love it. It's got great stuff in it. But I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't recommend it for someone to watch necessarily. And certainly wouldn't say it as... And I think, aside from that, I don't think it's quintessentially spy enough either to be a spy classic. It is much more adventure, action adventure. So I'm going to be controversial and actually say no. But on my personal classics, obviously, yes.
I didn't see that coming, but I think I also saw that coming at the same time. I know you have a sensible head on you, despite loving the film.
Yeah, I like to be fair.
You're being critical.
Critical eye.
Yeah.
As much as you...
Yeah.
As much as you can be, completely critical when your favourite films are Spy Kids 2 and Shrek.
I mean, I've seen Jaws the Revenge probably like 50 times in my life, so I cannot judge in any way, shape, or form.
You're definitely going to be Jaws the Revenge correspondent for our W-rated episode.
I mean, he's got a Jaws poster in the background of his room right there.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Jaws guy. But okay, so Daisy's going no. This could go either way, guys. I'm going to put Cam first. Yay or nay?
For me, this one is a no. I think I enjoyed it. Like, I actually think this one mostly works, but it does have that energy kind of sag there in the middle. Kind of a weak villain. I appreciate what Rodriguez is doing. I like the way he fills out the world here, and just even throwing in someone like Bill Paxton, who he didn't mention, but like Bill Paxton's the greatest, and just seeing him pop up, infuses energy into a movie, and he does that over and over again. It feels to me just like Rodriguez just playing in the sandbox, but it does work, I think, for an audience. It's just like, when I'm looking at movies that we didn't put on the list, stuff like, say, Men in Black, Bourne Identity, movies like that, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I had fun with all those movies. It's just that I didn't think they were kind of hitting that tier necessary for tipping over into a knock list. So I did not walk out of Spy Kids 2 angry. I did not walk out having had an unpleasant experience. I just don't think this is a top tier movie.
It is kind of hard to argue with that, and I know I'm like trumping it in like I'm going to be a yes on this, but there's 2 no's, and I think I'm going to also be saying no. It is a step down from the first film, not a mighty step down. It's not come crashing down around it, and it's something we've experienced, a year and a half into this podcast now. Is that, if we have a yes at the beginning, sometimes you'll find it falls to a no there on in with the sequels, with a couple of the things we did. Like, it's hard to pick one off the top of my head right now, but I think Ipcris File was one of the ones. And then for the rest of Harry Palmer's didn't make it because they just weren't as good. So, maybe there's hope for 3 and 4. I don't remember enough about them to say. Everyone's making little sour faces, so maybe not. But there's still hope, guys. Don't just say it's a no. We'll see how we go. We might really love it after 20 years.
Is there hope?
No. Well, there you go, folks. 3 no's, and as such, Spy Kids 2 is not making the island of the knock list, unfortunately. But Daisy.
Mm-hmm.
You're a rock star. Get your game on. Go play.
I love it. I love it. I want that to be my outro for everything.
You should use it. But no, we both want to thank you for stepping up as our, foreign correspondent, our Spy Kids 2 correspondent, the only person that could bring the passion about this film, apparently, because Cam is not a passionate person at all.
There's nothing left. There's nothing left.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a dry husk.
Imagine how I feel when the films that I have to watch for my podcast. The latest one of which was The Human Centipede 2. So you can imagine how I feel.
That's the worst one of the three.
It really is.
I do not watch much like horror on that level. Like I watch a lot of horror movies, but like there's something about the Human Centipede premise. I was like,
it's like the extreme level of it's not. It wasn't fun. It wasn't what I wanted to do with my Sunday. But you make a commitment to these things, and at some point you have to face the music. The worst thing is that I already watched them out of curiosity and thought, that's it. I never have to watch that again. It's done now.
I've got
lo and
it.
behold,
There's humans. They're in a centipede. I understand the idea.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, no, lo and behold. So yeah, if you're going to talk about empty, just trying to never, just trying to get that out of your mind. Yeah, I can get it. I get it.
Well, I hope Spy Kids 2 was a less painful watch than
so much
Human
better.
Centipede 2.
So much better. If we're going to compare sequels, then.
Yeah, sure. Well, but speaking of your podcast, tell the listeners where they can find out more about you.
Sure. So on Twitter, I am at Daisy Vic Edwards, and then the podcast is at WRatedPod. We are also on Letterboxd, where it's I think it's just W-rated. And basically you can find the podcast on anywhere you usually listen to your podcast. If you're unsure, we've got like a link tree that's on the Twitter and everything, so you should be able to find everything you need there if you just go to the Twitter handle.
Awesome.
We'll be sneaking in the links in the show notes below as well to the podcast and to the letterbox as well, so easy to find. Just scroll down. Well, again, we want to thank Daisy for joining us, and you can of course find out more about the W-Rated podcast on their Twitter page and the show notes below. But Cam, before we talk about next week, I do want to quickly mention our Patreon page.
So yes, on the Patreon, we have done our commentary on the Ipcris file, and we've done episodes on Wayne's World, and dropping this week, War of the Worlds from 2005, starring Tom Cruise. I'm really looking forward to revisiting this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
But Cam, what are we doing next week?
Well, if there's one thing Spy Kids like to do, it's take flight. And we're going to take flight with a different spy. A spy named Clint Eastwood in the 1982 techno thriller Firefox.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about Firefox. I'm always up for more Clint Eastwood. And we have another Spy Master interview coming next week with the writer of the film, Wendell Wellman. So tune in on the Friday as well to find out all about how the film was put together. And he's worked with Clint Eastwood on a number of projects. There's some great stories there for Clint Eastwood fans. So check that out.
Yeah.
And so your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to watch Firefox and join us next week. If you want to hear more about the SpyHards Patreon and help support the show, you can find it at patreon.com/SpyHards. And we thank you all that have jumped on board so far. Do not forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, things are a little floopy round here, but it's a living.